My landlord was secretly live streaming me and my daughter's life to millions online, so I secretly gathered evidence and built a case that took down much more than just his network. When I met a guy willing to rent his spare room for me and my daughter Lacey, the deal seemed too good to be true. We'd spent months bouncing between cheap motels and friends' couches. Nobody wanted to rent to a single mom who worked at a diner. So when I first saw Daniel's listing, I was beyond skeptical. But then he opened the door, smiling warmly and shaking my hand like an old friend, and relief flooded through me. He listened quietly when I explained our situation, nodding sympathetically and reassuring me that he valued helping people over making money. His place was gorgeous, a well-kept home in a safe neighborhood with kids playing outside. I felt like I hit the jackpot. The day we moved in, Daniel helped unload the car. He smiled a lot, not in the creepy way either, but in a way that made it seem like he was genuinely happy to help. He'd ask about Lacey's favorite books, and promised her he'd keep an eye out for new ones at the library he volunteered at. It was thoughtful, and for the first few weeks, life felt easy again. Lacey settled into her new school. She liked Daniel's big backyard and how he kept popsicles stocked in the freezer for her. Everything felt right. But then a couple of months in, I started noticing little things. Nothing huge at first. One day my underwear drawer was a mess. I'd just done laundry, so it made sense to blame it on rushing. But then my journal was open to a page I hadn't looked at in weeks. I brushed it off because Lacey sometimes flipped through things when she was bored. But then Lacey started getting jumpy. She'd wake up at night and come crawling into bed with me saying the red light in the corner of her ceiling scared her. When I went to look, there was nothing there. I convinced myself it was trauma from our past life creeping back in. Around that same time, Daniel's conversations got a bit too personal. Like one night at dinner, he casually mentioned how it was probably good Lacey wasn't taking ballet anymore because she didn't seem to enjoy it. It would have been thoughtful if it weren't for the fact that this was a private conversation I'd had with her the night before when she'd whispered it to me. When I looked at him funny, he just laughed it off, saying he'd probably overheard through the walls because they were so thin. But they weren't thin at all. The unease only grew when the electric bill suddenly doubled. Daniel blamed it on faulty wiring, but something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, too smooth. At night, when everything was quiet, I'd sometimes hear this faint buzzing sound coming from somewhere in the walls. Daniel always dismissed it when I asked about it, but it didn't feel right. Then my anxiety got worse. I started staying up late scrolling through Reddit threads about surveillance paranoia. People wrote about hidden cameras in Airbnbs and apartments. It seemed impossible that something like that could happen to me. Daniel seemed so normal, but every night lying in bed I felt watched, like there was a pair of eyes in every shadow. Then one night after my shift, my coworker Andrea came up laughing. She nudged me and said, "Hey Tess, did you know you have a twin online? This chick on some creepy live stream site looks exactly like you." I laughed it off at first, but I couldn't stop thinking about it on the drive home. My stomach tightened when I walked through the door. Daniel greeted me from the couch as usual, but the whole time he was smiling, my skin crawled. That night, Daniel went to bed early, leaving his laptop open on the kitchen table. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't shake Andrea's words. My hands shook when I opened the screen. His browser was still open. It had this dark-themed site up with a bunch of thumbnails of different rooms. I clicked one labeled guest bedroom. My heart stopped. I was looking at an online live stream of our bedroom. Lacey's stuffed bunny on the bed. My clothes piled on a chair. It was happening in real time. I clicked another one labeled bathroom. My stomach dropped seeing my face from earlier that morning getting ready for work. There was another labeled Lacey's room. It showed my daughter sleeping soundly, the red glow of a hidden camera faintly visible in the corner. Below the videos were chat rooms filled with disgusting comments, anonymous users calling out private details about my life. There were even subscription options promising exclusive footage. I couldn't breathe. I felt violated, terrified, sick. And there at the top was Daniel's username. He was listed as the host. His smiling profile picture taunted me, the same friendly grin he always wore when he asked if we needed anything. I stared at the screen, barely able to process what I was seeing. Daniel had been watching us this whole time. I should have screamed. I should have packed up and left, but I didn't. Instead, I started planning to ruin Daniel's life. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, now aware of the tiny camera hidden in the smoke detector above my bed, its small red light occasionally blinking just like Lacey had described. I needed proof. I needed a plan, and I needed to make sure Daniel never suspected that I knew. I couldn't sleep that night, not for a single minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined all those anonymous people watching us, commenting on our lives like we were characters in some sick reality show. I kept glancing at the smoke detector, that tiny red light blinking occasionally, mocking me. I wanted to tear it out of the ceiling, smash it to pieces, but I knew I couldn't. Not yet. When morning came, I acted as normal as possible, made breakfast for Lacey, helped her pick out clothes for school, all while feeling like my skin was crawling. Daniel came into the kitchen as we were eating, and it took everything in me not to flinch when he put his hand on my shoulder as he reached for the coffee pot. "Sleep well?" he asked with that same friendly smile that I used to find reassuring. Now it just made me want to throw up. "Like a log," I lied, forcing a smile. "You feeling better? That migraine gone?" He nodded, pouring his coffee. "Much better. Thanks for asking." I watched him carefully as he sat down across from us. Did he know that I knew? Could he tell something was off? I tried to remember if I'd left any trace of my snooping on his laptop. I didn't think so, but tech wasn't really my thing. After dropping Lacey at school, I called in sick to the diner. I needed time to figure this out, to search for cameras without Daniel watching. But when I got back to the house, his car was still in the driveway. "Great. Thought you had work," he said when I walked in. "Shift got canceled." I lied, hanging up my jacket. "Not enough tables. Happens sometimes." Daniel nodded, then gestured to his laptop. "I'm working from home today. Just feel like being around the house, you know?" There was something about the way he said it that made my stomach twist. Was he keeping an eye on me? Did he suspect something? I spent the day pretending everything was normal while my brain was in overdrive. I did laundry, cleaned our bedroom, all while casually looking for cameras. I found 3 more, one disguised as a wall outlet, another in the air vent, and a third in the base of the lamp on my nightstand. The more I found, the sicker I felt, but I made sure to act like I hadn't noticed anything. Daniel Daniel hovered around all day, coincidentally, showing up wherever I was. When I was folding laundry in the living room, he decided to read on the couch. When I was cleaning the bathroom, he suddenly needed to fix a cabinet hinge right outside the door. It was exhausting trying to act normal with him watching my every move. Finally, around 3 p.m., he announced he needed to run some errands before picking up a few things for dinner. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I raced to Lacey's side of our room. I had to find the red light she'd been talking about. It took me less than 2 minutes. There it was, built into her bedside lamp, a tiny camera lens with a red indicator light that would only be visible in the dark. The sick bastard was watching my 8-year-old daughter sleep. I was taking pictures of it with my phone when I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Daniel was back already? I frantically put everything back exactly as it had been and rushed downstairs, trying to look casual as he walked in with a bag of groceries. "Forgot my wallet," he explained with a chuckle, patting his back pocket. "Can't buy much without it." I laughed like it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard, all while wondering if he'd come back because he was watching me on a hidden app and saw me finding the camera in Lacey's lamp. That night, after Lacey was asleep, I laid in bed with my phone under the covers, researching hidden cameras and what to do if you find them. Most advice said to go to the police immediately, but something held me back. What if they didn't believe me? What if they took too long to act and Daniel destroyed evidence? What if we ended up homeless again because of it? I remembered how the police had treated me years ago, when I reported Lacey's dad for harassment after he left. He kept showing up at our apartment at odd hours, calling constantly, and following me to work. The police were sympathetic but offered no real protection until he finally escalated to breaking our windows. I couldn't risk that happening again. The next day at work, I confided in Andrea during our break. "Remember that website you mentioned? With the person who looked like me?" I kept my voice low, even though we were alone in the break room. Andrea looked uncomfortable. "Yeah, but honestly, I might have been mistaken. It was late and I was scrolling through some weird rabbit hole. Can you remember the site name?" I pressed. She shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "Some random string of letters and numbers." I closed it as soon as I realized what it was. She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "I was afraid to tell you everything because I was worried how you'd react. My ex used to make me feel crazy whenever I caught him doing something wrong. I didn't want to upset you if I wasn't completely sure." I appreciated her honesty, but I couldn't rely on her help right now. I tried researching camera detection apps during another break, but my ancient phone didn't support any of the good ones. I'd need a newer model, which meant spending money I didn't have. Still, I set aside $30 from my tips that day. It would mean skimping on groceries, but our safety was worth it. That night, I pretended to sleep while actually documenting the locations of cameras I'd found so far. The smoke detector above our bed, the outlet near my dresser, the air vent in the bathroom, Lacey's bedside lamp, the light fixture in the hallway. The more I found, the angrier I got, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed a plan, not a meltdown. My phone battery was getting low, and I couldn't plug it in without looking suspicious if Daniel was watching the feed. I managed to document 8 camera locations before I had to stop. The next morning, I called one of the local women's shelters during my break at work. My stomach dropped when they told me they were full with a 2-week waiting list. "I can put your name down," the intake worker offered, "but it would help if you could go to the police and get a report filed." "I'll think about it," I said before hanging up. During lunch, I created a new email account not connected to any of my personal information. I started documenting everything: dates, times, camera locations, Daniel's strange comments and behaviors. I had just finished sending myself the first batch of notes when my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Just updated our Wi-Fi security. Let me know if you have any trouble connecting." My blood ran cold. Was it a coincidence? Or was he monitoring our internet usage too? I deleted the email app from my phone immediately, not wanting to risk him seeing it if he had some kind of monitoring software installed. That evening, I made a devastating discovery while Lacey was taking a bath. I'd been doing a more thorough inspection of the bathroom while pretending to clean, and found a tiny camera hidden in the heating vent near the shower. The angle gave a clear view of the entire bathroom, including the tub. I almost threw up right there. He wasn't just invading our privacy, he was creating what had to be child exploitation material of my daughter. But removing the camera would alert him that I knew. Instead, I started a new routine. I took showers with my clothes on, then changed under towels. I made sure Lacey did the same, telling her it was a new game called Super Secret Spies, where we had to practice changing clothes without anyone seeing. The next day, I borrowed Andrea's newer phone during our shift, and used it to search for camera detection apps. I also tried searching for the livestream site, using terms related to hidden cameras and live streams. After several dead ends, I found a site that required membership to access. The homepage had blurred preview images that made my stomach turn. They looked like hidden camera footage of different rooms. I signed up using a fake email and a prepaid card I kept for emergencies. The $29.99 membership fee hurt, but I needed to know what we were dealing with. Once inside, my worst fears were confirmed. There was an entire section labeled Single Mom and Daughter, with thumbnails showing our bedroom, bathroom, and other areas of the house. Even worse, there were archived videos dating back months before we moved in, showing previous tenants in the same rooms. My hands shook as I scrolled through, seeing other women and children who had no idea they were being filmed. Daniel hadn't just targeted us. This was his whole operation. The site had different membership tiers. Basic members got access to live streams and recent archives. Premium members paid extra for special requests and more invasive footage. And platinum members, paying hundreds monthly, got something called direct interaction opportunities that I didn't want to even think about. I took screenshots of everything, documenting usernames, payment details, and the site structure. Then I deleted the browser history on Andrea's phone and returned it to her locker before she noticed it was missing. That night, I created a new game with Lacey. "Let's be detectives," I suggested, keeping my voice light and playful. "Every day we'll check our room for spy bugs like they do in the movies." Lacey thought it was great fun, especially when I showed her how to change clothes in the closet, where the spy bugs can't see. We made it into an adventure, checking behind picture frames and inside light fixtures. I hoped it would keep her safer without scaring scaring her about what was really happening. Daniel noticed our new routine. At dinner that night, he asked casually, "What's this detective game you two are playing?" My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. "Oh, Lacey's class is doing a unit on mystery books. She's really into it, wants to be a detective now." I turned to Lacey with a smile. "Right, sweetie?" Lacey nodded enthusiastically and launched into a story about her teacher reading Harriet the Spy to the class. Daniel seemed to accept the explanation, but I noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Over the next few days, I started subtly covering cameras around the house. I hung a towel over the bathroom vent to dry. I rearranged some decorations to block the view of others, but each time Daniel would tidy up when I wasn't around, putting everything back in place. I switched tactics, using clear nail polish on some camera lenses when Daniel was out. It wouldn't be noticeable to someone just glancing at the device, but would make the camera feed blurry. I also started playing music constantly, claiming it helped Lacey with homework, hoping it would interfere with the audio. Daniel confronted me about the music after a few days. "The constant noise is giving me headaches," he said, rubbing his temples for effect. "I'm sorry," I replied, not turning it down. "Lacey's having trouble concentrating at school. Her teacher suggested background noise might help her focus. It's really making a difference." He couldn't argue with that without seeming unsympathetic, so he backed down. But the next day, I noticed new speakers installed in the living room and kitchen. "Thought we could use an upgrade," Daniel explained when I asked. "These have better sound quality." I bet they also had built-in microphones. Around this time, I met another mom at Lacey's school pickup. Jessica had a son in Lacey's class and mentioned she was looking for a roommate for her 2-bedroom apartment. "My previous roommate bailed, and I'm struggling with the rent," she explained. "It's not huge, but there's a proper bedroom for each of us." It sounded perfect, but there was a catch. The current tenant wasn't moving out for 3 weeks, so the room wouldn't be available until then. Still, it was the first real escape option I'd found. I gave her a deposit from my emergency fund, praying we could survive in Daniel's house until then. Meanwhile, I was noticing more and more signs that Daniel was entering our room when we weren't home. Things would be slightly moved. The closet door that I deliberately left open would be closed. My journal, which I now filled with fake entries as a decoy, would be at a different angle than I left it. I started setting tiny traps. A single hair placed across the door frame, a pencil positioned precisely on the desk, the cap of my lip balm turned to a specific angle. Each day, I'd come home to find these tiny signals disturbed. He was going into our room daily, probably adjusting cameras or downloading footage. I couldn't confront him directly. It was too dangerous, especially with no proof that would stand up to police scrutiny. Instead, I started keeping our most personal belongings in a gym bag that I carried with me everywhere. Lacey thought it was part of our spy game, but I was terrified of what would happen if Daniel realized I was onto him. One afternoon during my lunch break, I visited a free legal aid office near the diner. The volunteer lawyer couldn't offer much help without me filing a police report, but she did give me some crucial information. In our state, I could legally record conversations I was part of without the other person's consent. I could also take photos of anything in plain sight in areas of the house I was permitted to use. Armed with this knowledge, I started recording all my conversations with Daniel on my new prepaid phone. I would casually bring up topics that might get him to reveal something incriminating. I was reading about these new smart home devices I mentioned over dinner one night, phone recording in my pocket. "They've got cameras and everything now. Kind of creepy, right?" Daniel shrugged, taking a bite of pasta. "That's just the world we live in now. Privacy is pretty much dead." He gave me a look that sent chills down my spine. "You should be careful about what websites you visit, by the way. Lots of sketchy stuff out there." Was he confirming that he monitored our internet usage? It felt like it, but it wasn't the smoking gun I needed. The following weekend, I noticed one of the bathroom cameras had been repositioned, angled differently than before. It now had a better view of the shower. The adjustment made me feel physically ill, but I couldn't remove it without alerting Daniel. Instead, I accidentally sprayed cleaning solution directly onto it while cleaning, hopefully damaging the lens. A few days later, Daniel came home with a gift. "For the bathroom," he said, handing me a small bag containing decorative towel hooks. "Thought they might brighten up the space." I looked at the hooks, immediately suspicious. They were bulky, with unusually large bases that could easily conceal cameras. "That's so thoughtful," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll put them up right away." Later, while installing them, I accidentally dropped them repeatedly on the tile floor until I heard something inside break. When Daniel asked later if I liked how they looked, I apologized profusely about my clumsiness, showing him the broken hooks. With only 10 days left until we could move into Jessica's apartment, I was checking the live stream site daily, using the public library computers, trying to gather more evidence. One day, I noticed something alarming in the chat section. A user named PremiumView69 commented, "Can't wait for the special event this weekend when Landlord is gone. Worth every penny of platinum membership." What special event? Daniel had mentioned going out of town that weekend to visit his brother. Was that just a cover story? I checked his calendar when he was in the shower, something I'd started doing regularly, and found no travel plans at all. Instead, he had blocked off the entire weekend with a note that simply said, "Home, special project." Whatever he was planning, I didn't want to be there for it. I told Daniel the next morning that Lacey and I needed to visit my sick mother that weekend. "It's short notice, I know," I said apologetically, "but she's not doing well, and Lacey hasn't seen her in months." Daniel's reaction was immediate and unsettling. "I could watch Lacey for you," he offered quickly. "Save you the trouble of taking her along. You'd be free to focus on your mom." "That's really kind," I said, maintaining my fake smile. "But my mom would be heartbroken not to see her. She's asking for both of us." He reluctantly agreed but seemed agitated afterward. I caught him texting frantically when he thought I wasn't looking. I didn't have a sick mother to visit. Mine had passed away years ago. But I did have just enough money left for 2 nights at a cheap motel across town. I told Lacey we were having a special girls' weekend as a treat. At the motel, with a door that locked and no cameras watching, I finally broke down. All the fear, anger, and tension of the past weeks came pouring out. I cried in the bathroom with the shower running so Lacey wouldn't hear me. Then I washed my face, put on a smile, and ordered pizza for us as a special treat. While Lacey watched cartoons, I used the motel's Wi-Fi to log into the live stream site again. I needed to see what this special event was supposed to be. The site had a countdown timer on the main page. Special access event, 22 hours remaining. There was a whole section dedicated to it, but it required platinum membership to view, far more than I could afford with my nearly empty bank account. I spent hours documenting everything, taking screenshots, recording screen captures as evidence. I was so focused on gathering information that I didn't hear the knock at first. When it came again, louder, I jumped. It was the motel manager, a middle-aged man with a concerned expression. "Ms. Rivera, there's a man on the phone saying he's your husband. He's quite worried about you and your daughter." My blood ran cold. "I don't have a husband." The manager frowned. "He says his name is Daniel Whitaker. Claims you took your daughter without telling him and he's concerned for her safety." Of course Daniel had tracked us down. He probably had location tracking on my phone, or maybe on Lacey's tablet that I'd brought for her to play on. "He's not my husband," I said firmly. "He's my landlord. I rent a room from him." The manager looked skeptical. "He says he's calling the police to report a missing child." I was trapped. I didn't have any custody documentation to show this man. Daniel was painting me as an unstable mother who had disappeared with her child. I made a desperate decision. "Can I show you something?" I pulled out my phone and showed him some of the screenshots I'd taken of the livestream site, careful to avoid any that actually showed Lacey. "This man has hidden cameras all over my bedroom and bathroom. He's streaming it online to paying customers. I found out and took my daughter somewhere safe for the weekend." The manager's expression changed as he looked at the images. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "This is real?" I nodded, fighting back tears. "I'm gathering evidence before going to the police. I'm afraid they won't believe me without proof." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "My ex-wife went through something similar with a peeping neighbor. Cops didn't do jack until she got video of him setting up the cameras." He seemed to make a decision. "I'll tell him you're not registered here. And don't worry about tonight. It's on the house." I thanked him, relieved to have found an unexpected ally. But my relief was short-lived when I received a text from Daniel an hour later. "Very concerned about Lacey. If you don't respond in 1 hour, I'll file a missing persons report with the police." I had no choice but to text back. "We're fine. Visiting my mother like I said. Back tomorrow evening as planned." His response came immediately. "Good to hear. Been worried sick. Give Lacey a hug for me." The thought of him even mentioning Lacey made my skin crawl. I turned off my phone location services and deleted several apps I suspected might be tracking us. We returned to Daniel's house Sunday evening as planned. He greeted us with seemingly genuine concern, asking about my mother's health and if our trip was okay. I fed him vague answers while watching for any sign that he knew I was lying. As Lacey unpacked her overnight bag, I noticed new decorative items in our bedroom, a small shelf that hadn't been there before, and a different lamp on my nightstand, both perfect places to hide new cameras. But now I knew exactly what to look for. I'd spent the weekend studying hidden camera designs and had downloaded a detection app to my new prepaid phone. Daniel didn't know it, but I was no longer his unwitting star. I was preparing for a role he never expected me to play, the person who would bring his entire operation crashing down. Two could play the surveillance game, and I was planning to win. I waited until Daniel went to sleep that night before starting my counterattack. The detection app on my new phone worked perfectly, lighting up like a Christmas tree whenever I got near one of his devices. Just as I suspected, the new shelf and lamp contained tiny cameras, both aimed directly at our beds. I needed solid evidence linking Daniel to the website, not just the cameras themselves. The next morning, I called in sick again and waited for Daniel to leave for his volunteer shift at the library. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I placed my phone to record Daniel's desk area from a hidden spot on the bookshelf. I discovered this was where he uploaded new footage and managed subscriber messages. Almost had a heart attack when he came back unexpectedly for his forgotten lunch. I was still adjusting the phone's position when I heard his key in the lock. I snatched it and pretended to be looking for a lost earring under the bookshelf. "Everything okay?" he asked, eyes narrowing slightly. "Lost an earring," I mumbled, holding up a random stud I kept in my pocket for exactly this purpose. "Found it, though." He nodded, grabbed his lunch from the fridge, and left again, but I felt his suspicious gaze lingering on me the entire time. When I checked the recording later, I nearly cried in frustration. It had worked, showing Daniel logging into the site and responding to customer messages, but the footage was too dark to clearly identify his face. The angle was right, but the lighting was all wrong. I needed better light in that room, so I came up with a plan that made my skin crawl. I'd need to play nice with Daniel. Extra nice. That evening, I accidentally knocked over the lamp in his office while bringing him a cup of coffee I'd offered to make. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, making a show of trying to clean up the broken pieces. Daniel was annoyed but trying not to show it. "It's fine. Accidents happen," he said tightly. The next day, I came home with a brand new lamp, brighter than his old one and positioned perfectly to illuminate his desk area. "You didn't have to do that," Daniel said, examining the lamp with suspicion. "I felt terrible about breaking yours," I replied, forcing a grateful smile. "It's the least I could do after everything you've done for us." The words tasted like acid in my mouth. That night, I set up my recording phone again, and this time it worked perfectly. The video clearly showed Daniel's face as he logged into the administration panel of the website, checked payment records, and uploaded new footage. I even captured him speaking to some viewers in a private chat, mentioning his special weekend plans that I'd managed to avoid by taking Lacey to the motel. But as I was retrieving my phone, a floorboard creaked under my foot. I froze as Daniel's voice called out from his bedroom. "Hello? Is someone there?" I slipped quickly to the kitchen, turning on the light just as he came around the corner. "Just getting some water," I said, pulling a glass from the cabinet with trembling hands. Daniel stood uncomfortably close, watching me fill the glass. "Having trouble sleeping?" he asked quietly. "A little," I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. "Work stress." He studied my face for a long moment, and I could almost see the gears turning behind his eyes, trying to decide if I knew something. "Well, don't stay up too late. he finally said. Those dark circles under your eyes are getting pretty noticeable. It took everything in me not to throw the water in his face. The next morning, I sent everything to the detective Andrea had connected me with. All the recordings, screenshots, and photographs of camera locations. She called me within an hour. This is exactly what we needed, she said, her voice tense with controlled excitement. We're preparing a warrant now, but the legal process will take at least 24 hours. Can you keep things normal until tomorrow? I think so, I whispered, locked in the bathroom with the shower running to cover my conversation. But please hurry. Keeping up appearances for another day felt impossible, especially when Daniel announced he was taking us out for dinner to celebrate being like family. The calculating look in his eyes made me wonder if he suspected I was onto him and was planning something. I agreed to dinner anyway, texting the detective our location as we drove to the restaurant. At least in public, we'd be relatively safe. Throughout dinner, Daniel's phone kept buzzing with notifications. Each time he checked it, his expression grew darker. Whatever was happening on his precious website clearly wasn't making him happy. Something wrong? I asked innocently. Just work stuff, he muttered, silencing his phone. Technical issues. I wondered if the detective had already started moving against the website's servers. The thought gave me the courage to make it through dessert, stalling as long as possible while Lacey enjoyed an ice cream sundae bigger than her head. As we pulled into the driveway, my heart nearly stopped. 2 unmarked police cars were parked on the street. Daniel immediately tensed, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. Stay in the car, he ordered sharply, all pretense of kindness gone. What's wrong? I asked, playing dumb while reaching back to unbuckle Lacey's seatbelt. Are those police cars? Before he could answer, Detective Rivera approached the driver's side window, showing her badge. Mr. Whitaker, I need you to step out of the vehicle, please. Daniel's face transformed into something unrecognizable, rage and panic fighting for control. He threw the car into reverse, but I was ready. I grabbed the keys from the ignition and opened my door. Lacey, come with mommy right now, I said firmly, helping her out of the car as Daniel swore and tried to grab the keys back from me. We managed to get out of the car, and I pulled Lacey toward the porch as Daniel abandoned the vehicle and darted toward the back of the house. 2 officers immediately gave chase while Detective Rivera stayed with us. Are you both okay? She asked. I nodded, holding Lacey close as we watched the officers catch Daniel trying to scale the back fence. They brought him back around in handcuffs, his friendly facade completely gone, replaced by cold fury as he glared at me. You lying bitch, he spat as they walked him past us. I gave you everything. I turned Lacey away, covering her ears, but she'd already heard. She looked up at me, her small face serious. The red lights can't watch us anymore, right, Mom? I nodded, finally letting the tears come. That's right, baby. No more red lights. The next few hours were a blur of police statements and evidence collection. Officers carefully removed cameras from our room while others seized Daniel's computers and equipment. Detective Rivera explained they'd need our statement again in the morning, but tonight we could stay at a hotel the department would arrange. We've already identified over 20 cameras throughout the house, she told me quietly, while Lacey was distracted by a female officer who was showing her police badge. And the website had nearly 500 subscribers. It's one of the largest operations of this kind we've seen. My legs nearly gave out. 500 people were watching us? Try not to think about that right now, she advised, steadying me. Focus on the fact that you stopped him. You protected your daughter and potentially many future victims. We spent 2 nights in the hotel while the police processed Daniel's house as a crime scene. I couldn't afford to miss more work, so I went back to the diner, where everyone had somehow already heard what happened. My manager pulled me aside immediately. Look, she said, surprising me with a quick hug. I rearranged the schedule so you can work mornings only for the next 2 weeks. And, she hesitated. We took up a collection. She handed me an envelope. It's not much, but we thought it might help with moving expenses. Inside was nearly $600 in cash, more than enough to cover the security deposit for Jessica's apartment. I burst into tears right there in the break room. Thank you, I managed between sobs. You have no idea how much this helps. Andrea hugged me too, finally explaining why she'd been so weird about the website. I was afraid to tell you everything because I thought you might think I was making it up, she admitted. My ex used to do that, make me think I was paranoid when I actually caught him cheating. I should have been more direct. The detective called later that day to tell me they'd identified 3 other victims, previous tenants who had no idea they'd been filmed. We formed a support group of sorts, meeting for coffee to share information as the case progressed. Daniel was denied bail, considered both a flight risk and a danger to the community. The prosecutor warned us the trial could take months, but the evidence was overwhelming. Most of Daniel's subscribers would face charges too, especially those who had directly requested or paid for specific content featuring minors. Jessica and I moved into our shared apartment the following week. The first night, I woke up at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat, convinced I could see a red light blinking in the corner. I checked the entire apartment with a flashlight, finding nothing but still unable to shake the feeling of being watched. It gets better, Michelle, one of Daniel's previous victims, assured me when I told her about my paranoia. I used to shower with my clothes on for months after I moved out. I didn't even know why I felt so uncomfortable there. I just knew something was wrong. She was right. Gradually, the hypervigilance faded. I still checked for cameras sometimes, but the panic diminished. Lacey started sleeping through the night again, though she still wanted her closet light on. 6 months later, faced with the mountain of evidence against him, Daniel accepted a plea deal. 15 years with no possibility of early release, plus registration as a sex offender. Part of the agreement was that all footage would be destroyed after being used as evidence. We can't guarantee everything has been removed from the internet, the prosecutor warned me gently. Some subscribers may have downloaded content. It was a harsh reality to accept, but I chose to focus on moving forward, rather than dwelling on what couldn't be changed. Jessica and I decided to remain roommates even after her lease ended, finding a larger apartment where each family had more space. Our kids got along like siblings, and having another adult to share responsibilities with made everything easier. On the 1-year anniversary of the day we escaped Daniel's house, I thought about marking the occasion somehow. maybe a small ceremony of closure, or even just acknowledging how far we'd come. But when I mentioned the date to Lacey, she just looked confused. That was like forever ago, Mom, she said, rolling her eyes in that preteen way she'd recently adopted. Can we please go get ice cream with Jessica and Ethan instead? You promised last week. Looking at her, happy, safe, and wonderfully normally annoyed with her mother, I realized we didn't need to commemorate the trauma. The best revenge against Daniel wasn't anger or bitterness. It was simply living our lives as if he'd never mattered at all. You're right, I said, grabbing my purse. I did promise ice cream. Let's go get Jessica and Ethan. As we walked to the ice cream shop, Lacey reached for my hand, something she'd recently decided she was too old for in public. I squeezed her fingers gently, savoring the moment. Love you, Mom, she said quietly. Love you too, baby. No red lights, no hidden cameras, no creepy landlord pretending to be our savior while exploiting our vulnerability. Just us, building a real life, on our own terms. And honestly, it's pretty awesome.